For the uninitiated, here is all that you need to know. Patek Philippe and steel means that you have a winner on your hands, a watch that will be very sought after in the future. There are a handful of vintage steel Patek pieces that have been bought and sold under everyone's noses in auction houses, and some noteworthy collectors also have managed to find their fair share of pieces in the past, but these pieces are exceptionally rare. Nowadays you can own a steel Patek Philippe if you want a Nautilus or an Aquanaut, or the more obscure 5522 or 5524 Calatrava pilots. They seem to be vanilla watches. And if you really have more money than sense, you could purchase a 5960, an annual calendar chronograph. But the thought of owning any model in steel, like say a base model Calatrava, is difficult to imagine nowadays, since the majority of Patek Philippe pieces have always been made from precious metals. What Patek managed to do this year is unveil a watch that truly is noteworthy, the Calatrava 5212, known as the Weekly Calendar, a piece that manages to amalgamate subtlety and elegance into a contemporary form. It is a modern-day masterpiece. What is fascinating about this model is that it blends many motifs that makes it a piece of the 40s and the 50s, like for example how the lugs have been stepped, very classical as an approach, and something seldom seen on pieces nowadays. The case inspiration came from the reference 2512, a watch that incorporated a very similar styling and is extremely rare today. The standout feature of the new 5212 is the, some would say, antiquated approach of how the dial consists of printed text instead of windows signifying the day and the month. But with these strange inclusions, more akin to design styles of the 20th century, note that this Calatrava is sized at 40mm. The new caliber made for this piece is also interesting, since it allowed for the placement of 5 separate hands. This is a feature seldom seen nowadays, and at most you would find 4 hands on a piece, like on the double-split chronograph or a GMT. What keeps the hand layout so balanced is that their size is relevant to their importance. So looking at the characteristic hour and minute hand set, it is clear that they are the most important. The seconds hand with its large counterbalance is next, and the 2 hands signifying the day and the month are last. And instead of following the usual approach of utilizing a triangle or a crescent moon that we often see with hands like these, the 5212 uses flat, slightly curved bars, which marry well with the separate wheels within the dial, accentuated by touches of red. The color of the dial, opting for an ivory finish instead of white, again calls back to the past. It is a very complementary color, and it would have been made all the better if the date window followed the same color scheme. But the layout on the dial is what makes this watch stand out the most. There is something so intrinsic about the script chosen on the dial, and this is one of the reasons why I believe it makes the watch into something more of a masterpiece. The script communicates far more than what is obvious. Instead of exhibiting a typeface that is filigreed and elaborate, something that we would expect to see from a brand like Patek, the approach taken makes the style all the more humane, as if someone jotted down the days and the months in a journal by hand. What the simplicity of this style of text does, I believe, is make the watch more approachable to anybody. Anybody of any standing could look at this watch and read it without being given the impression that it is trying to show off. This styling is a celebration around the watch's history and craft, but also celebrates the wearer and how our modern script has evolved. And when you narrow it down, this is the edge that the 5212 has. The ability of being so complex, but at the same time casual and unassuming. It takes on the format of what the traditional Calatravas always have exhibited, but now, even as a complicated machine, it still manages to remain a simple dress watch. One remark that I would like to make about the piece is that I feel it would have been more complimentary if there was no date window, and instead the watch adopted a 6th hand that would move around the dial in tandem with the day and the month. This is difficult to achieve, and if you notice in the example, a 6th hand does clutter the dial. I tried to differentiate it with a circle. But the free hands also hammers home the approach of what this particular model is trying to achieve. That nothing about the watch is hidden. From the small inaccuracies of the handwritten script to the many arms indicating points on the dial, this truly is a fascinating watch that marries modern with vintage and is unlike any modern Patek found today. This watch is not trying to stand out. Instead, it harkens back to tradition. But it is so casual about it, and to that extent, the approach taken has produced a timeless design. Not only will this watch be sought after and become highly collectible in the future, but even now, a few months after the watch was unveiled, the 5212 Calatrava is already a classic. And avant-garde designs like these should be celebrated as hallmarks of what modern contemporary watch design is capable of.